Okay, I am live again. Right, yesterday I went live, as some of you were watching me and would know, and I managed to talk for about an hour and a half, and then somehow it disappeared. It got lost, so it didn't stay up on YouTube. So these are just tests, really. I'm doing because I'm going to be doing a regular talk to camera like this about various mysteries I've investigated over the years and current investigations. And I just want to make sure I know how to do this. Hopefully, after I do this one, I will be able to keep it up on YouTube. Also, I just trying out different times when to do it to see what time more people decide to watch. I was doing it yesterday at about midday, and I got quite a few people watching. But now it's about 6 o'clock in the evening, and one person is watching. So, hello, whoever you are. Anyway, this is mainly a test, but I'm going to be talking about my book, The Virgin Mary Conspiracy. Remember that word conspiracy? It wasn't a dirty word when this book came out. Published in, that's the American version, and it's also that you can get that in the UK as well. That was originally published as the Marian Conspiracy, published by Macmillan back at the turn of the century, turn of the millennium. So what is it about? Okay, firstly, just the term conspiracy. When until this century, the word conspiracy was not a dirty word. It simply meant a number of people had got together in order to cover something up or to make sure they got away with something which might be a bit iffy. The case of the Virgin Mary conspiracy is that I said that the church back in the 1950s tried to cover up the fact that some archaeologists had found a tomb that they believed to be the Virgin Mary's tomb. It upset the Vatican first because there was a tomb in Jerusalem that they said was Mary's, and they made quite a lot of money out of letting people see it. And also there was other belief that the Virgin Mary had ascended to heaven like Jesus in what's called the Assumption, so therefore she couldn't have a tomb anywhere. But anyway, so that was what the conspiracy was. I mean, now these days, you use the word conspiracy and it means things like believing the Earth was flat or something like that, or that no one's ever been to the moon and stuff. But no, this was quite straightforward historical investigation. And it actually did very well. It got a little publicity. It finally got me excommunicated, and which is weird because I've never actually been communicated. I'm not a Catholic. I don't go to church. But when the book came out, it so upset the Vatican that I was asked to comment by an Italian newspaper. You've been excommunicated, Mr. Phillips. What do you have to say about this? I said, I'm not even communicated. How can they excommunicate me? Apparently, the way it works is that quite a few schools were buying this book, Catholic schools, and because it had been published in various languages, in Italian and Spanish and Portuguese, and it was selling well in Brazil and places which are Catholic countries. And schools are getting these copies in and basically saying this is an interesting thing to consider about where the Virgin Mary's tomb might be. And because the doctrine of the Catholic Church now is that the Virgin Mary ascended to heaven, she couldn't have a tomb, or at least there certainly wasn't a body in it. So the way that they stop books being, taken in by schools for their libraries and so on, is basically the simplest way is to excommunicate the author. And they can't bother to go and test out and check to see if every one of these authors of books that they don't want in schools is actually a Catholic or not. So they just basically produce a whole load of names every month and get the Pope to sign it. But it does mean that I'm in great company. Henry VIII was excommunicated, so was Galileo. I'm sure a lot of other rather nasty people. Not that Galileo or Henry VIII were nasty. Okay, here we go. People are saying, hiya, Graham, so interested. Thank you. Manifestor 1111. Oh, is that? Anyway, whoever you are, hi. Anthony C. Hello again, Graham from Dorset. Hello, Anthony. Got the book and thoroughly enjoyed it. Oh, this one. Oh, the Virgin Mary book. Cool. Thank you. Anyway, the story is that let's just look at the Virgin Mary as she's mentioned in the Bible. She's Jesus's mother, and she, after the she's present at the crucifixion, mentioned in the Gospels, and the last she's mentioned is that she seems to be staying with the disciples in a house in Jerusalem. That's it. We don't hear any more about her. We don't know what happened to her or anything. Early Christian legends built up, and they came pretty early on. One that she was buried. She went with one of the disciples, Thomas, if I remember rightly. I haven't looked at that book for 20 years, so I think it was Thomas. And was it Thomas? No, John, I think. Anyway, she went with one of the disciples to Ephesus, which was a city in what's now Turkey, and she settled there. And yeah, Thomas was the one who was supposed to go to India, so I think it's John. Yeah, it is John, I think. And she settled there, and that's she was eventually buried. And if you go to Ephesus today, there's a little house there, an old ancient cottage, which Mary's supposed to have lived in, and she was supposedly buried somewhere near there. That the big sort of tourist pilgrim attraction was a tomb in the Valley of Jehoshaphat in Jerusalem, and that tomb was basically the Catholic Church made quite a lot of money out of that over the years, showing people the tomb, until 1950, when the Pope at the time, see, until that point, there was kind of two church traditions about Mary. One, that she was buried in a tomb like anybody else, and somewhere out there her body was still to be found. And in fact, there was a skeleton in the tomb in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, which was shown to people as these are the relics, the bones of the Virgin Mary, over many centuries, probably going right the way back to the time of the first Christian Roman emperor, Constantine the Great, in the 320s, 325. I think it might have first been identified by his mother, a devout Christian by the name of the Empress Helena. Well, she was the Dowager Empress at this time, but Empress Helena, or Helena, she was the one who identified the tomb in the Valley of Jehoshaphat as being Mary's. But over the years, there was another tradition that because Mary was so secret, she ascended bodily to heaven as her son Jesus did. So she couldn't have remains on earth. And this is called the Assumption. She's assumed to heaven. Anyway, but until 1950, it was left to the decision of the individual churchgoer to decide whether they believed that Mary had ascended to heaven, or she was buried in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, or at Ephesus, or wherever. But then the Pope decided that no, the Virgin Mary, she went to hold on, somebody said Anthony just over the border in Somerset. Oh, that's where they're coming from, Dorset and Somerset. Cool. So yeah, they said that the Pope said that no, she ascended to heaven. That is now church doctrine. So it was no longer up to the individual churchgoer to decide whether the Virgin Mary had bones on earth anywhere or not, or a tomb. Now this left them with a bit of a problem that the Vatican had to sort out, because particularly the archaeological side of the Vatican, which is associated with the Vatican Museum, because they had been endorsing this place in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And now they had to turn around and say, no, she's not buried there anymore. Well, eventually they gave the place over to the Orthodox Church that now run it. I think they share it with the Armenian Church, but I couldn't swear to that. It's the Orthodox Church anyway that mainly run it. And if you ever look at a picture of the tomb of the Virgin in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, you'll often see pictures of the Orthodox Church priests and so forth, monks outside of it. Anyway, so they did that, and so kind of like they hushed up the fact that they didn't talk about the fact that they'd been making money out of this tomb for years, because it couldn't have contained a virgin's body because she had gone to heaven. So I think the bones kind of like conveniently disappeared. Anyway, that's just part of the story. They actually, what happened is the Vatican, a department in the Vatican called the Congress of the, God, it's been 20 years. Basically, what used to be the Inquisition, it's now called the Congress for the Institution of the Faith, I think. Anyway, somebody will no doubt correct me on that one. Anyway, this department that used to be the Inquisition, if you actually go into the Vatican main sort of St. Peter's Square thing, looking at the St. Peter's Basilica in front of you, the doorway to what was the Inquisition is just on the right. Anyway, these guys basically said they got someone from the Vatican, an archaeologist attached to the Vatican, not a priest, but an archaeologist working for the Vatican Museum. They said, look, people are claiming there are one or two other places that were supposed to be the tomb of the Virgin Mary. And so they said, look, have a look at the one in Jehoshaphat, have the Valley of Jehoshaphat in Jerusalem, have a look at the one in Ephesus, and just basically tell us, you know, and any others, and tell us what you think. They basically wanted information that they could stand up and say, these are not the Virgin Mary's tombs, because, so it was kind of, it was rather, it wasn't an open investigation. It was, the whole thing was kind of staged. But the guy who did all this research came back and said, well, I'm not quite sure about Ephesus, and I'm not quite sure about the Valley of Jehoshaphat, but I have found another one that's supposed to be, of all places, in Britain. And they said, oh, no, 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 no. And it was the cover-up of this that was the Virgin Mary conspiracy that I referred to in the title of the book. Or in fact, that was the title the publishers, Macmillan, decided to call it. I didn't call it that at all. I don't know, can't remember what I wanted to call it. Witchy Gypsy back again. Hi, just caught this. Hello. Talking about the Virgin Mary's tomb and how I went searching for it. So what I found really fascinating, firstly, about the Ephesus one is why that might not be the actual tomb of Mary. When Christianity started, one of the first places to convert, the first people to convert to Christianity, believe it or not, weren't the Jews. Well, there was a few, obviously, followers and disciples, but it seems from reading the Bible and from the various historical references that there are to the early church, it's mainly the Greeks who followed it. I mean, St. Paul was basically a Greek Jew who then converted to, well, became a follower of Christ. And he was from Tarsus, part of the Greek world. All Paul's letters mainly are going to the Ephesians, for example, and the Corinthians, all part of the Greek world at the time. And it was basically the Greeks that took this idea on. The reason why Christianity became so widespread so quickly is it appealed to two groups of people that other religions within the Roman Empire were pretty much excluded from: women and slaves. And that was where the numbers of the church came from. But one place that it really got going was in Ephesus. And the reason being because there was a cult of the goddess Artemis. Artemis was a goddess of birth and of nature and of all sorts of things, pretty similar to the idea that the Catholics later had of the Virgin Mary. And the depictions of Artemis, when you see of statues that have been dug up at Ephesus, show her often seated or standing on a crescent moon. And this is how all the early statues of the Virgin Mary are depicted. And in fact, archaeologists over the years have been completely confused when digging up statues dating from the early Christian period around Ephesus, when there was both Christianity and the cult of Artemis going on there, as whether what they were digging up were statues of Mary or Artemis, and it seems that Artemis statues were later being used to represent Mary. And very often now you just look at a picture of the Virgin Mary in art throughout the Middle Ages and right from ancient times, and you will very often see her depicted sitting on a moon or seated on a moon, and that is, or with a moon, a crescent moon associated with her. Again, this ties up with something that's mentioned in Revelation, but it's difficult to know quite how old that is. Anyway, it seems, in my humble opinion, that the whole idea of the Virgin Mary being associated with Ephesus is maybe because there was a cult there associated with Artemis, became converted to Christianity, weren't prepared just to worship God, a male God, or the Son of God, Jesus, and decided that they needed equivalent to what they had been worshipping in Artemis, and took on the devotion to the Virgin Mary, which is maybe where Virgin Mary devotion actually started. So that kind of like, that one didn't seem too real to me. The Valley of Jehoshaphat is a different matter. The only thing is that the dating of that tomb doesn't seem to date from much earlier than about 300, late 200s AD. So that probably isn't, but who knows, it may have been built on top of something else. But this one that was in Britain really fascinated me. I actually went, because I couldn't find hardly anything about this, you know, just a few mentions here and there in various books about the idea that she might have been buried in Britain. And I actually went to the Vatican, had a meeting with somebody who worked in the Vatican library. I kept asking about the so-called secret archives, you know, that they have there, that they're supposed to have all sorts of documentation to reveal secrets about the church and goodness knows everything else. And I got to see part of the secret archives, and this guy said to me, what was his name? Rinsolini, I seem to remember. Cardinal, no, he wasn't a cardinal. I mean, Monsignor, if I remember right, Rinsolini. Anyway, he said to me, he showed me around all these stationery requisitions and things with boxes of receipts and stuff, and he said, this is part of what people call the secret archives. It's a complete mess. Now, whether he was fobbing me off or not, I mean, I know there are parts where there's very much older stuff, but I was in part of what some people think is the secret archive, and it was just literally piles of boxes full of receipts and inventories, and you know, reading it, I mean, I had to get him to translate some of this stuff, but basically last week we received 42,000 paper clips or things like that. Anyway, this guy was quite interested in what I was doing, and he'd actually read my book about the Holy Grail, which he was interested in. So he thought, and he read the King Arthur book, so he was quite sort of, you know, decided that was all right. And from him, I learned, he said, but the main reason why this guy, I can't remember his name now, in the 50s, had decided that there was a place in Britain where the Virgin Mary was buried, is because there's a guy called William of Malmesbury, who was considered to be one of the most learned historians in Europe in the 1100s, and about 1130 he wrote about the first Archbishop of Canterbury, a man called St. Augustine, who came to Britain around about 600 AD from Rome to try and convert the Anglo-Saxons here to Christianity. Christianity had pretty much waned out of existence in Britain after the Romans had left in the early 400s. The Saxons were here, they were purely pagan. The Pope sent Augustine to Britain. He began preaching in Kent and converted the people of the Kingdom of Kent to Christianity and moved on around the country. And William of Malmesbury wrote about him and said that he refers to various letters that were sent back and forth from the Pope to St. Augustine. And he traveled throughout Britain trying to convert, and he was very successful at converting various Saxon kings to Christianity. And what he said is, when he got to what's now Wales, which is pretty much the British part of the Anglo-Saxons never invaded Wales, so consequently it had more of a direct link back to the Roman times and earlier Christianity, which the Saxons hadn't got because they'd come from Germany after around mid 400s. When he went towards Wales, the people in Wales there were some of them still practicing Christianity, what's known as Celtic Christianity. It was a more kind of liberal form of Christianity than the more orthodox or strict form of Catholicism. They didn't have to do things according. They didn't have a hierarchy of priests for a start. But he said what was fascinating is that he'd heard talk amongst the people of Wales, the Britons, as he refers to them, referring to the Virgin Mary coming to Britain after the death of Christ. This is the belief. He didn't say he believed it, did St. Augustine, and neither did William of Malmesbury comment on it by saying, yeah, this is true or not true, but that the people of Britain had a belief that the Virgin Mary had come here after the death of Jesus and had lived for 15 years and was eventually buried on an island in the west of Britain. And the way they describe that island, well, I'll tell you what it seems to fit in a moment, but why would the Virgin Mary come here? It's very similar to the stories of Joseph of Arimathea bringing the Grail here, and Mary Magdalene also bringing a cup hole in the blood of Christ, what I was talking about yesterday, to Britain. Why Britain? Well, the thing about the Roman Empire, by the time Jesus was alive, the Romans had ruled all of Western Europe, France and everything, right up to the coast. And if you're being persecuted for your new religion, Christianity, by the Romans, one of the only places you can either go off into some completely foreign environment like Persia or into Africa or even there, you're probably not going to do very well there. But there were strong ties between the Roman Empire and Britain. There were a lot of trading, a lot of Roman people from the empire had settled in Britain, but it was still a free country from the Roman Empire, and it wasn't invaded until until 43 AD under the Emperor Claudius. So in 33 AD, which is supposedly the time of Jesus' crucifixion, Britain might have been one of the only places you could go and continue to worship freely. The people of Britain, from what we know from Roman and Greek writings, were fairly welcoming to foreigners and their religious beliefs until the Romans eventually invaded. They changed their ideas then. And there was regular trade routes from the Mediterranean round the coast of Spain and France to Britain, or there were roads going all the way to the French coast, and then across to Britain there were regular trading vessels. So yeah, Mary could have come in. It's not impossible by any means. Plenty of other people from the area of Palestine did settle in Britain. We know this from archaeology and historical records at this time. So anyway, where was this island that it referred to? Well, there's only one island that seems to match. It talks about being the largest of the islands off the coast of West Britain. Well, the only place that could be really is Anglesey. And when I eventually started to research into Anglesey, I found all these early legends there that the Virgin Mary did come there. Many people for many years believed that she'd actually settled there somewhere. That some said that she'd come with a Joseph of Arimathea, and others that she'd come on with other associates of Jesus, and established a church there. There is a St. Mary's Church pretty much in the centre of the island at a place called Llanach Med, which is actually a St. Mary's Church. The earliest references to it refer to it as a St. Mary's Church. The early churches, in the what we call the Dark Ages, like the early Middle Ages, were named after saints whose bones were supposed to be there. And in other words, what they used to call relics. And so it suggests that somebody at some point, over 1,000 years ago, decided that Llanach Med Church, the Mary's Church, which is now a relatively modern one, but what it originally stood upon was where the bones of the Virgin Mary were. And I even found reference that somebody had moved these bones to somewhere up the road at the in the 19th century, I believe. I can't fully remember now when they were moved, but they were moved to somewhere that was at the a spring, you know, at the beginning of a little river. By this spring, she was supposed to have been interred again. The bones were reinterred. While there was, I can't remember when it was now, but there was some problem there, and people were digging things up, and that they didn't want, you know, this was back in the Middle Ages, I think, not the 19th century. Anyway, eventually went to the place where this spring was, and we found there that there was a stone slab on just in beside the road, which looks like an old fallen megalith, and next to that there was another stone with carved on it the sign of Virgo the Virgin from the astrological sign. So did that mean that somebody thought the Virgin Mary was there? That stone is now in the no one's actually done, and we actually got some we got some geophysics survey done there, and there definitely is a grave, and there seems to be somebody buried there. The actual headstone, this Virgin Mary stone, is now in the Island Museum, and the museum is called Ariel Innis Mon, the Gallery of the Isle of Anglesey. That translates that, I believe. I'll probably pronounce that wrong, but that's basically what it's called. It's in the center of the island, and the stone is now it's there somewhere. I haven't been back to see it, but that's where it is. That's what the story is about. I'm just, as I say, doing this talk just to see if I can manage to make sure it doesn't disappear again. Let's have a look. People might have been asking questions. Graham, somebody's saying something in Spanish. I will have to translate that. Let's bear with me. Let's see what it says. It looks like there are any great matches for your search. Oh, don't know what that is. Maybe it's Portuguese. Sorry about that. I won't be able to answer that question. Where have I gone? Oh, here I am. Okay. Have you ever seen James Goddard page? Nope, I'm afraid I haven't. He posted a video called Joseph of Arimathea, Hometown and its Megaliths. Oh, so megalith in Arimathea, I assume. I think Arimathea is somewhere in Galilee, isn't it? That'd be interesting. You would think the Catholic Church knows where she is buried, considering she is worshipped like a god. Well, they don't bother with it anymore, Matty, because they think that she ascended. I mean, the Catholic doctrine is that she ascended to heaven now since 1950, so they're not bothered. But the major place that they did say she was buried was the Valley of Jehoshaphat, and the tomb of the Virgin is actually there now, run by the Orthodox Church. Hi, Graham. Anna. Hello, Anna. Graham, I'm part of another page here called the Pathfinders. Would love to have you have a look, please. Okay, fine, I will. I've done a few videos on the Paradise story here in Somerset. Oh yeah, I mean, Jesus is supposed to have gone to Paradise, that place called Paradise, isn't he? In Somerset, there's a little village called Paradise. There used to be a pub there called the Adam and Eve, but I don't know if it's still there. I remember going past it when I was driving past it when I was a kid. Priddy, which is not far from there, which has got a big stone circle, that is, people there believe that Jesus once went there, that he came. There's many stories about Jesus coming to Britain at some point in the period between when he went to the temple when he was 12 years old, according to the Bible, and when he starts preaching around the age of 30. You know, these missing kind of like almost 2 decades. Some people believe he came to Britain and was trained by Druids. Other people believe he went to India and was trained by Buddhists. Some people believe he went to the Qumran community by the Dead Sea and was trained by Gnostics. But many people in Britain have know the legend that he went to Priddy, and I think in the town of Priddy there was a saying. They'd say if something was definite, as sure as our Lord was in Priddy, Priddy, I think you pronounce it. It seems to be that place, and the idea that Jesus once came to Britain, that William Blake wrote the poem Jerusalem, and did those feats in ancient days, i.e. Jesus is walk over England's pleasant land, or whatever it is. That's all about Jesus coming to here. So yes, yes, Somerset, interesting association with Jesus there. I've actually visited Llan Church and Mound in South Wales. Brilliant. Lundy. Or do you mean that could be Lundy Island? Well, not the way it's described. The island is actually described as the largest of the islands, and Anglesey is the largest by far until you reach Scotland. But interesting. Or Steephole. My mind is now connecting Heart of the Rose to the Sacred Heart to now Mary Virgin. Well, yeah, Heart of the Rose, Sacred Heart, Virgin. Yes, very interesting. Something is here in Great Britain. Yes, Graham, in Burnham on Sea. I was actually in Priddy earlier today. Oh, we cool. So there we go. That's everybody there. I had 7 people watching. So doing it yesterday at midday seems to have far more people watching than doing it at 6 o'clock. Maybe everyone's having their dinner. Yesterday said Joseph was a metal trader and the Mendip was full of lead, which was 30% silver, so very valuable. And it was Joseph was given 100 tithes of land in Pilton. Interesting. Anyway, this is just, as I say, a test. What I'm going to start to do is to schedule when I'm going to be doing talks, and I'm just trying to kind of work out a time when it's best. I mean, so that people in America and the UK can see it together. I don't know if anybody's got any ideas. Just leave a message underneath if you think you know the best time. Witchy Gypsy, yeah, there are records in Tibet of a man called Jesus learning meditation. Yes, I've heard about this. There's a tomb there that people in India actually say could be Jesus's tomb, I believe. Thanks very much for your work, as always. My pleasure. Friday night, always busy time. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's Friday, isn't it? Oh, God. Being an old man and not going to work, I keep forgetting. Yeah, Friday isn't a good time. Definitely weekends, perhaps a Sunday or something. Anna Raphael, there you go. Okay, then I'll switch off now. Oh, and remember, for anybody who watches this, I am giving a tour and a talk and guided tour of Shugborough Estate, which is near Stafford in central England, on the 26th of April. I'll put the details underneath, but if you want to know what all about that, and if you want to go, I'll be talking about the Holy Grail. It's all about the Grail and the connections with Shugborough Estate and the search that I did for the Holy Grail. If I can get security sorted right, I might even be able to have the cup that I believe was the original Holy Grail there for people to see. But anyway, I don't know that yet. But if you look at my Facebook, Graham Phillips, author, you will see all the links to book or find out more about this tour. Okay, that's it. Bye for now. Bye, end stream. Let's hope this one doesn't disappear. Bye.